session for the bikeway planning and design. If we can start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, for the last, let's say, 18 days or so, we've had maps available at the library and posted for the public hearing for the traffic authority. We've received good feedback from people via message in the hallway or emails, word of mouth, that this is a project which seems to be supportive. So without further ado, I'd like to have you kick it off with sort of a walkthrough, an overview of what we're doing.
Sounds great. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Rob Pinkney. I'm with the BSC Group. I'm the project manager for the Stratford Greenway extension project. We've been working with the town and its committee for the last almost year now. And we've come up with some concept plans. We presented them in January at a public information meeting, and then we've solicited some feedback from the traffic authority. And that's what brings us here today, is to kind of give a regroup of where we stand. Just real quickly, this is part of the presentation. I'll keep it down to about 20 minutes, give a brief overview of the project itself, and then talk about some of the challenges that are associated with a certain part from Broad Street to Broadway along Elm Street. But today's agenda is overview and history, just the project limits overall, some short-term improvements and long-term improvements, and then looking ahead where we go from here. Excuse me. The overview and history of the project has been, like I said, about a year with our help with the town. We've been selected through the qual solicitation, and we've worked with the committee to come up analyzing several different concepts for the corridor that was pretty much predetermined a little bit before we started through one of the COG reports. The idea of this slide is to emphasize that the project is part of an overall grander scheme. This is just one small portion of the East Coast Greenway, or can be associated with the East Coast Greenway. Basically, it's a bike facility that travels all the way from Florida through Maine, about 2,200 miles, 2,900 miles. Zooming in, we're here in Connecticut. Moving to the next piece, here's Connecticut's East Coast Greenway map. Again, zooming in a little bit closer. Here's the Bridgeport area, Stratford area. As you can see, the different parts and pieces that are associated with the East Coast Greenway in the regionally, the Merritt Parkway Trail, the Pequannock River Trail, the Housatonic River Greenway Trail, and then looking at Stratford, how does that all play together, and making it a grander picture, making it not just a small piece here in Stratford, but making it regionally and nationally as well. We keep bouncing in and zooming in. So here's essentially the project as we are talking about today. Begins in the south down near the Bird's Eye area, traveling all the way up through to the Main Street area, with the last portion that's actually in the orange dotted, basically on hold, at least at this point, until further discussions with what's going on with the train station and the TOD project and the analysis that's going on with that. The red is the main spur, if you will, the main trunk line. It's about 1.63 miles. The two yellow pieces are spur trails, one associated with the theater, the Shakespeare Theater, and the other associated with the Perry House, basically taking some of the users to points of interest along the way, not only just providing connectivity, but also some interesting regional and historical pieces. So, completed to date, as I alluded to before, we've been through some different concepts. We've been back and forth. We probably had about 3 or 4 different committee meetings. We went out, measured the roadways, figured out what could or couldn't fit, looked at the right-of-way, what could or couldn't fit on-road, off-road, shared views, dedicated lane, several different options. I basically came up with a matrix to present to the committee, and the overwhelming feedback from the committee at that point was basically we wanted to get something done quickly, inexpensively, build some momentum, and then take another look at what can we do for future steps. And part of that process is who are we designing for? You know, a lot of people think bikeways and we think guys that look like this, and that's absolutely not the case. You know, these are the people that they're going to take the lane, they're going to ride wherever they want. They call them the fearless, if you will, the brave and the fearless. We're really designing for, you know, the people that look more like this, and really more like this, the families and the commuters, giving them someplace safe to ride, to get from point A to point B, whether it's to work, for shopping, recreation, or just purely for exercise. So we talked about different design options ranging on this slide from basically the bare minimum, doing nothing, leaving the shoulder, because a cyclist has the right to the road unless strictly prohibited, such as 95 and any other kind of limited access highways. But, you know, ranging all the way down to a bike boulevard, which is basically a roadway that's dedicated just for bicycles. But we've gone from really simple to really complicated, and, you know, the ideas of changing to a bike boulevard are really way out there, maybe not quite right around the corner, but they're coming. Different towns and different communities have different appetites for those kinds of things. But we talked about all those. It was part of that process of getting a feel for what does the committee want, what does the town want, and where does it all fit in. Shared lanes is basically the Sharrow marking or some signage. Conventional bike lane is a striped bike lane that is only for bicycles, no parking, no other vehicular traffic. And then the side path being the off-road dedicated, if you will, that people think of a bike trail, if you will. So a little bit more on specifics, I won't dive into them here, but, you know, basically Sharrows, which is something we will talk about a little bit later, are appropriate for some of this corridor because of speed and volume. We wouldn't want it to be anything over 35 miles an hour. We would not recommend a Sharrow use just because of speeds and conflicts at that point. Here's what a typical Sharrow look like, you know, layout. We have some on-street parking. We have basically the shared use marking. I alluded to the Mario Kart. Basically, it's connecting the cyclists from sign to sign to sign, or from pavement marking to pavement marking, to basically reinforce, not so much to the cyclist, but to the driver, the cyclist's right to be on the road, and that they have to share it and give way. Conventional bike lane, as we talked about, that's striped with dedicated markings and signing for the bike. You know, obviously needs a little bit more roadway width. We have that in certain locations, not so much in some others. And we'll go through some different parts and pieces to get to that. And then the side path being completely separated. There is one section that we did discuss along Elm Street that it could fit with the available right-of-way, but the challenges of crossing back and forth on traffic and all of the signals kind of, we shied away from that and went to the on-road facility, both because of cost and because of complexity at that point. So after our meetings, we got to the point where the committee and most of the recommendations pointed to the conventional bike lane as the preferred option for this segment. First option, and then the second option being the shared use. So we kind of got rid of the bike boulevard and the paved shoulders, the either end of the spectrum, the extremes, if you will, and we kind of limited to those three. The side path was used just slightly on the north end, but as I alluded to earlier, that portion is on hold, so it's not going to be part of the next step of the project. So here's what the overall map looks like with the different types of facilities identified. Blue being the conventional bike lane, red being the shared use roadway, and the orange, like I said, just a small piece right at the north, and also dotted because it's on hold, being the side path. So as you can see, most of the trunk line along Elm Street is a conventional bike lane. There's a couple pieces up and over Academy Hill where the roadway's just not wide enough right now to accommodate that, so that's a shared use. And then the last segment between Broad Street and East Broadway along Elm is also shared use, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. So here's a quick photo rendering that we did. Well, this is not actually a photo rendering, but this is the existing condition. And here comes the photo rendering of what it would look like adding the conventional bike lane to it. So most of Elm Street is going to look like this. It's fairly simple, fairly straightforward, just using some of the pavement to give the cyclists their dedicated lane. Here's where we talked about the side path that's on hold. It's a good picture to see where this is up off of Sutton Ave, between that and Main Street, a little bit of the access road. What could be essentially the side path if we clean it up and put some landscaping, and we pulled the bollard and pillar from the other end down near Birdseye again, what could be pretty pictures, right? It's here's behind something, or behind the commercial area with some artwork, mural work on what is the department's wall, but again, making it an inviting space for both riders and walkers alike. So really the big question, and one of the big pieces today, is the Elm Street from Broad Street to East Broadway. Physically just not wide enough to accommodate the cyclists and the parked cars and traveling public in the condition it's in today. So right now in the existing condition, there's from, I'll call it curb to curb or edge of pavement to edge of pavement, it's about 30 feet with parking on both sides. It's not prohibited, it's not encouraged, it's not anything, but it's what's happening. Typically on-street parking parallel is about 8 feet wide. So if we do the math, 2 8-foot lanes of parking gives us 16. Less from the 30 gives us only 14 for two-way traffic. 7 feet is not enough for a travel lane. People make it work right now, but it's not something we would encourage by introducing the cyclist as well. So to clean it up and formalize it, we would recommend eliminating the on-street parking from one side of the road and keeping it and formalizing it on the other, and then split the rest between a shared use. So that basically leaves us with 11 foot plus or minus, which is really bare minimum for that. By our count, there are about 14 driveways that intersect Elm Street from the East Broadway, East Broadway to Broad Street, and we could provide formalized parallel parking of about 30 spaces, so almost 2 for every home that accesses. Several of the houses actually have driveways that intersect off of side streets, so in that respect, making it a little less complicated. One of the other things that we haven't really talked about, but could always be discussed, is parking by permit for residents. So anybody who lives on that street is issued a permit sticker for their car. That would help with some enforcement. Some of the discussion that we've heard is that the parking on the street along there is for commuters that are parking there and walking to the train station. Unverified, but certainly something that's been discussed. Again, here's just a look up Elm Street with if you can envision, if you want to try and add 2 cars going in either direction plus some cyclists, this is going to be a tight squeeze. So thus the cross section that we're looking for. Real quickly, here's the spur for the Perry House, one of the more complicated pieces, also one of the more expensive pieces, involving signal crossing on Main Street, a loop, some off-cycle tracks to cross, some green painting for crosswalks for cyclists, a raised crosswalk at the bottom. I think I have to zoom in, but basically offset crossing with the cycle track is to cross bikes all in one location. Again, this is going to take some outreach and some community support and some education. Here's the intersection crossing where we have a dedicated crossing for bike, a dedicated crossing for pedestrians, and it's all raised to slow traffic down. Recommended and supported by the committee. We'll see that's would be located at the bottom of the Perry House spur at Main Street, headed towards 95. The Perry House spur would include also what's called a buffered bike lane, where it's have a typical conventional bike lane, but also add a 2-foot buffer of striping, just because of speeds and width there. We want to, again, provide that little extra space for the cyclists. More and more we see a lot of green being used for cyclists. We talked about this for the crosswalk. We recommend it for only certain locations, for conflict areas, confusion areas. So very, very few for this project, but associated again with the Perry House spur. A couple of different locations, and what's shown on the slide is a couple of different options, obviously ranging from paint to the thermo, ranging in cost from $2 a square foot to $14 a square foot. So obviously something we want to use with a light hand and make some decisions. We don't want to be painting the whole bike lane from end to end just due to cost. So as a recommendation for the whole project, we would look for the next step beyond what's shown on the concept plans, which is providing the conventional bike lane and the shared use for most of the area, is to provide a continuous dedicated bike lane through the areas that are shared use at this point. So basically up and over Academy Hill again, as well as through the Elm Street area north of Broad. This would require construction, some capital improvements, planning long-term, but we also look to improve the pedestrian use as far as that with the sidewalk improvements as well as the roadway widening. So, and then the next step would be to go to a full-blown corridor rehab. But this is where the committee started to say, you know, it's not necessary at this point. It's kind of putting the cart before the horse. A lot of money that may not be warranted. Let's watch and see. Let's put some of these lower income or lower cost evaluations and measures in place, and see what happens. See how many users we get. See how much support we get. Use our momentum to take that to the next piece up the road. So for us, looking ahead for the next steps, we're going to finish our concept report to give to the committee for a final once we've received any more feedback from the public or from the traffic authority. And then once that closes, then the town would put it out for a final design and construction contract, which could be done very quickly in the next, even this year, or if not, a lot of times it'll be through the summer with an advertising in the winter for construction in the spring. So with that, I'd have any questions, and any comments can be directed to me at rpinkney@bscgroup.com.
Thank you very much. I had one question. You showed a slide with a raised intersection.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been approved by the police and police and fire?
It was recommended to the committee, but we're still awaiting some of the feedback from the traffic authority.
Okay. How high is the raise on that, or what's the plan?
Yep, so with the raised crosswalk, basically it's a 6-inch raise, so the curb reveal would be 0. So a typical curb being 6 inches. So it's usually a 10-foot ramp, a 10-foot over, and a 10-foot down with a 0 curb reveal.
I think there's a stop sign right there.
No, it's actually as you're headed towards the Perry House, so it's when you get to Green and I turn left if I'm headed north on Main Street,
Right.
there would be no, I would just be going towards Perry House at that point.
So where would the raised crosswalk is going to be where? Main Street or West Broad?
It
Sorry,
would
I'm just
be,
looking.
no, that's fine, let me go back.
Okay.
Like that.
Yep. So, this is Main Street.
Yep.
This is the Perry House over here. So if I do the loop, this is, I won't call it a roundabout or a rotary or anything, but that intersection that's there. So the raised crosswalk would be right here.
Gotcha.
So basically a cyclist would come along Broadway, cross here, do the loop, and then loop the cross back.
Okay.
So the idea was to raise the crosswalk here for any turning movement on a green in either direction to slow them down, just to make them aware of both the bike and the ped at that location. The light over here, we kept them to the left on this side to avoid them crossing a second time. At both ends, we've bumped out the curbs here and here to add a little bit more protection for the start of the bike lane. So as people leave or enter this, because it's about almost 20 feet curb to curb there for a single lane, there's nothing striped. So if we formalize it, it just becomes basically I don't want to call it choke point, but something that would slow them down to as they enter that, share that use. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have the raised areas in a lot of sections on the bikeway? Or yeah.
That's the only location.
Well, that's just in Stratford, but more.
Oh,
in other
it's
towns?
more and more. Different towns have different attitudes as far as them go. Well, here a lot of times it's a plowing issue, maintenance issue. Same thing goes with curb bump outs for crossings. And our response is always, well, New York City and Chicago are two of the largest cities, and they're two of the most bike friendly now, including Portland. And they have all of those things all the time, and they maintain them. So it just becomes changing a little bit of culture.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a new concept to some people, but they're out there for sure.
Does the committee have any other questions? No, I'll open it up to public comment, which I don't see anybody from the public here today. Well, thank you, Robert. Could you put your contact information back on?
Absolutely.
And maybe we can get a zoom in on the camera for the audience at home. If any questions, you're more than welcome to contact Rob regarding what you've just seen. That'll take a motion to adjourn the public public hearing.
So moved.